From the end of January to early April, Bitcoin crashed from a high of $109,000 to around $74,000. Altcoins did even worse, with many falling over 90% from their recent highs. So, needless to say, a lot of people were caught off guard by this move. Most of us were riding the Trump election high and thought that the pumper-in-chief would bring us to much higher highs. But here's the thing. Not everyone was caught off guard. You see, there were several analysts on X who actually saw this coming and called it well in advance. So that got me thinking. 1, how did they know this was coming? Like, what was their rationale? And 2, what are they calling next? Well, I had to know the answer to these questions, so I spent a ton of time combing through their posts on X. And in this video, I'll share with you everything I found. You're gonna wanna watch it until the end because some of these guys are like Nostradamus and some of their future predictions are absolutely wild. Alright, let's start with the first one, a pseudonymous analyst on X called Bitquant. Now, this guy was telling us to be careful all the way back in December, saying that we would need a deeper correction before the uptrend could continue. In February, he shared a chart that specifically marked the 76K price level as a potential target for a dip. And as we all know, that was pretty much on the dot. But just how did he know that that was coming? Well, he used Elliott wave analysis, as you see in this chart that he posted back in December. And his central thesis is that this market cycle is bigger than any one in the past, so any rallies or corrections would be larger than normal. So yeah, that was his calls in the past, but now, as of March, he's calling for Bitcoin to pump to 145K. Now, he didn't give a precise timeline for it, but presumably it would happen sometime this year, or else we could probably assume that it wasn't right. Anyhow, the next guy who called this move to a T is a macro and liquidity expert called Michael Howell. Now, Michael specializes in analyzing liquidity and he uses that to predict what will happen next. So back in January, he warned that Bitcoin was about to experience some downside pressure in the first half of this year. He even mentioned 70K as a tactical line in the sand where he looked to accumulate some BTC. Now, as we all know, the price got really close to that level, and he was able to predict that by modeling the relationship between global liquidity and the price of Bitcoin. He did a bunch of fancy stuff like introducing lags and looking at other drivers of Bitcoin's price, such as the price of gold, the gold to BTC ratio, and a measure for risk appetite. Okay, so that's cool and all, but what is he predicting next? Well, he's calling for Bitcoin to reach a whopping $250,000 within the next 3 years. Why? Well, because he expects that central banks, especially the Fed, will resume their money printing activities. He thinks that they'll be forced to print because of macroeconomic conditions, whether they want to or not. So yeah, that prediction is a bit more far out, but personally, I'm all for it if it happens. Anyhow, next up we have a popular influencer on Crypto X called CryptoBurb. And in December of last year, he warned us to quote, brace for a few pullbacks early next year, despite the ongoing rally. He also called for Trump's inauguration to be a buy the rumor, sell the news event, which, as we all know, is exactly what happened. Now, more specifically, he predicted at least 2 corrections of 15%, with the most likely scenario being 3 corrections of 30% before the final phase of the bull run. He called for these corrections to happen by late January and February of this year, which is pretty much exactly how it played out, with Bitcoin's drop to 76K being around 28%, which is super close to his 30% number. Now, as for how he saw this coming, well, that pretty much comes down to his technical analysis skills and his assessment of market psychology. But as for what he's calling next, now that's where things get crazy. You see, he's calling for BTC to hit 200K or higher this year instead of 3 years like that other analyst. His rationale is that retail investors haven't really joined the party up to this point, but that they will come back in force. And to get that precise number, he's looking at the MVRV Z-score and other indicators to see what the price would be when BTC hits its peak levels once again. I mean, that would be absolutely crazy, right? Personally, I wouldn't bet on it, but if it happens, this guy would be Nostradamus. Alright, now the next analyst who called this crash to a T is someone that most of y'all already know because he is quite famous. But before we get there, a quick heads up for those of y'all who are actively trading these days. So our channel partner Femex is running a pretty interesting promo right now. They're giving away a $100 USDT position airdrop to new users. So basically you get a $10 margin voucher, which at 10x leverage lets you open a $100 position, no strings attached. This could be handy for trading BTC, ETH, or whatever you're eyeing right now. All you gotta do is use my link and complete a couple quick steps and you're good to go. It is first come first serve though, and it only lasts until April 30th, so don't procrastinate if you wanna get in on that. Also, if you're looking to try out a new exchange or add another trading venue to your arsenal, then this $100 USDT position airdrop could be perfect for you. Just check out my links below. Alright, back to our modern day Nostradamuses. And this next one is none other than Arthur Hayes, the former CEO of BitMEX. Now, I'll be the first to say that he doesn't get all his predictions right. But honestly, who does? No one is God, right? But he does share some really well written and often contrarian theses on his blog. And in early January, he wrote this post that predicted a strong Q1 for Bitcoin driven by additional liquidity for the dollar. But by late January, he had changed his tune, warning that BTC would likely correct to the 70 to 75k levels, which is exactly what happened. But just how did he see this coming? Because he must have seen something that made him change his mind in real time. Well, his reasoning was quite complex. Like, there wasn't one singular thing that made him change his mind, but rather it was a mix of things like the central bank balance sheets, how the treasury bonds were acting, and also what happened with the Trump meme coin, which he saw as a sign of things to come. So yeah, once again, that was super clutch. But guess what he's calling for next? Well, he's calling for 250k by the end of this year, which is honestly crazy to hear. His reason why though, is because he thinks the Fed is going to pivot from QT to QE, aka money printing. And he expects this liquidity injection to fuel Bitcoin's next leg up. He also specified that if Bitcoin breaks its all-time high, aka 110k, then the move to 200k and above will likely happen without any significant dips. Now, once again, I find this all hard to believe, but with several different analysts saying similar things, it does make it a little more plausible for me. Anyhow, next up, we got a well-known investor and hedge fund manager who's also quite active on X. His name is Joe McCann, and in early January, he warned that Bitcoin was due for a significant correction. He specifically predicted that Bitcoin would pull back to his 10-month moving average, which at the time was around 75k. His reasoning was that he saw multiple bearish signals flash. He saw chart indicators like a shooting star candle. He saw the big CME gap. He saw a contraction in global liquidity and an unexpectedly strong US dollar at the time. So all of those together made him bearish and made him call for a notable correction, which of course happened and pretty much reached his target level to a T. Now, since that prediction has been fulfilled, he has since predicted that the local bottom is in and that Bitcoin will rocket to 150k next. But to be honest, his time frame is already a little bit off because he predicted for that to happen in Q1 and for Q2 and Q3 to be defensive, whereas Q4 would be a rebound quarter. So his initial bullish prediction is already off in terms of timeline, but we'll see if it potentially comes in Q4 and redeems his call a bit. Alrighty, last but definitely not least, we have another well-known analyst on CryptoX called Dave the Wave. Now, this one I've been following for a while now, and he's been making great calls for years now. Like, he accurately predicted Bitcoin's big drop all the way back in May of 2021. And now he's back again with his genius calls. Like in February, he predicted that Bitcoin would drop to the 0.382 Fibonacci level at around $81,000. And he said that the end of March should see the worst of the BTC consolidation based on this fractal. Well, lo and behold, BTC indeed reached the zone he identified by mid to late March. And his methodology is based on things like Fibonacci levels and fractal analysis. But yeah, one key theme from his prediction is that this price action is all part of a normal correction in a broader bull market, and it's nothing to worry about. So that definitely makes me feel a little bit better. But as for right now, he's calling for Bitcoin to peak in the summer of 2025. He bases this on Bitcoin's adherence to the logarithmic growth curve, specifically calling out the fact that BTC tends to reach its peak when the 52-week simple moving average touches the midpoint of the LGC channel. Now, as for the specific price, I don't think he shares that. But in terms of timing, it does roughly match up with some of the other calls we've seen thus far. Phew, that was a lot to digest, wasn't it? But what do you think though? Do you think any of these analysts will strike gold not once, but twice? Personally, I think many of them are too bullish and are calling for too high prices too soon. But I do think we can break 100K again in 2025, or at the very least in 2026. So I do remain bullish in the midterm. By the way, this is semi-related, but if you want to learn how to spot local bottoms yourself without relying on these analysts and influencers, then you gotta watch this video by my co-host Josh R. He teaches you how to do it.